the 116th justice and the first Black woman to sit on the Supreme Court in its 233-year history.
So we most recently read the memoir of Sheila Johnson called A Walk Through Fire. Who you pick as a partner is very important as a woman. It can literally make or break you, literally make or break your career, the trajectory of your life. A broke man with no ambition is like a dead-end job. I feel like social media is so filled with the worst stories about love and romance. And then you pick up a book, you know what I'm saying? And that's how you feel?
That's all.
For the freshest throwbacks to the throwbacks to the DFB on WPGC.
Thank you. You too.
I had to keep reminding myself that this moment was real. It was just before noon on the 30th day of June 2022, and I was standing in front of a plain wooden door that would soon open into the Grand West Conference Room of the Supreme Court of the United States. My family was already inside. My husband, Patrick, our daughters, Talia and Layla, and my parents, Johnny and Ellery Brown, were among the family members and friends who had gathered to witness my historic swearing in. My heart was hammering so loudly that I wondered if the two black-robed men standing on either side of me, Chief Justice John G. Roberts Jr. and retiring Associate Justice Stephen G. Breyer, could hear it too. Only 2 hours before, they and the other 7 justices of the Supreme Court had issued their final decisions of the 2021-22 term. Justice Breyer, a pragmatic consensus builder, was now stepping down from that august body, having been privileged to serve as one of his law clerks more than 2 decades before. I would be stepping up in his place. I drew a deep breath to steady myself as the door in front of us swung wide open and a court officer stepped aside to allow our passage into the room. Suddenly blinded by bright lights, I took a moment to understand that the source was a bank of video cameras set up to record the ceremony. As my eyes adjusted and I processed into the chamber behind the 2 justices, I felt heartened by the sight of my loved ones beaming at me from rows of chairs on the right side of the room. Chief Justice Roberts began by warmly welcoming those present. Then he turned toward me, now assuming a ceremonial air. "Are you prepared to take the oath?" he asked, his tone more formal than it had been a moment before. "I am," I responded, in a voice that sounded firmer than I felt. Patrick positioned himself between Chief Justice Roberts and me and held out a stack of 2 Bibles. "Please raise your right hand," the Chief Justice said, and I did so briskly, simultaneously resting my left palm on the pair of holy books. On top was our ancient Jackson family Bible, its brittle pages protected by the black leather binding that Patrick had the foresight to get refurbished in 2013 when I'd been appointed to the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. I had sworn every oath since then on this cherished family Bible, just as I would now swear the constitutional oath to be administered by Chief Justice Roberts, followed by the judicial oath to be given to me by Associate Justice Breyer. Nominated by President Joe Biden 4 months earlier, I, the daughter of African-American parents who had come of age in the segregated South during the 1950s and 1960s, would become the 116th Justice and the first Black woman to sit on the Supreme Court in its 233-year history. These details made the other sacred volume on which I would swear my historic oath doubly significant. Tucked beneath our family's holy book was the Harlan Bible, donated to the court in 1906 by Associate Justice John Marshall Harlan. This tome had been used for the oath-taking by every Supreme Court appointee since then. Each new justice had also signed one of the book's flyleaves after being sworn in. When the court curator brought the Bible to me in my temporary chambers later that afternoon so that I could add my own signature to the venerated roll, I thought about the justices of Harlan's era who collectively decided in the Plessy versus Ferguson opinion that state laws mandating the separation of people by race did not violate the 14th Amendment of the Constitution so long as the separate facilities were equal. Harlan had been the sole dissenter in that notorious 1896 case. And now, here I was, affixing my signature to his Bible in black fountain pen ink. Only one generation after my mother and father had experienced the spirit-crushing effects of racial segregation in housing, schooling, and transportation while growing up in Florida, their daughter was standing on the threshold of history, the embodiment of our ancestors' dreams, ascending to a position that Justice Harlan and his colleagues likely never imagined possible for someone like me. But if Justice Harlan and his contemporaries could not have pictured this moment, my family and I, and indeed most of America, were fully cognizant of the significance of my nomination and confirmation to our nation's highest court. In subsequent conversations with people from across the country, I learned that I had been carried on a million prayers lifted up on my behalf since the day of my nomination. I also fielded an avalanche of invitations to speak or appear in person, as excited well-wishers wanted to know my story in whatever form or fashion I might be willing to tell it. How was it, they wondered, that someone with such an unusual name and from such an unconventional background came to stand in such an unprecedented place, swearing an oath on 2 stacked Bibles that symbolized how far our nation had traveled? Mine has been an unlikely journey in many respects. And of course, this book is about that journey. Thank you for your interest in my story.
This man named Patrick Jackson was seated by you in class.
In a very important class. This was my sophomore year and his junior year. He was the year ahead of me, and we were in a class called The Changing Concept of Race in America. And it was sort of like a stadium seating kind of idea in the class, and he would sit behind me, and he would tap me on the shoulder, put his keys on my earrings, and whisper things. What do you think about that? And then eventually we got to be friends. At first I thought he was goofy.
Hey guys, it's been a few days since the Ketanji Brown Jackson event. So I wanted to talk to you guys today about the Ketanji Brown Jackson event and some takeaways that I had from that event. So this event I actually learned about through the book club that I'm a part of. I'm very passively a part of this group. But if you're interested in joining a book club for Black and brown girls here in the DMV, there's a book club called Brown Girl Book Club. So we most recently read the memoir of Sheila Johnson called A Walk Through Fire. And I talked about that a couple of vlogs ago, and I finally finished it. So after we recap about this Ketanji Brown Jackson event, I will give you the lowdown on this, because these two things go hand in hand for me, like going to that event and then also reading this book, because they're both very powerful women. They're both very educated, career driven, married, had kids, all these things. And I feel like, I don't know what my future is gonna look like, but if I could emulate these women, I most definitely would. Ketanji Brown Jackson. Ketanji Brown Jackson is a very animated person, which I didn't know. I've never really heard, I think I've heard her speak like maybe one time, but this is business related. So she wasn't the goofy person that she was on stage at the Kennedy Center. So when she started speaking, I was vlogging the excerpt that she was reading in case anybody else doesn't have her book yet like me. So I ordered it recently and it's currently in transit, but I found out later that day that they actually had signed copies there for purchase, which I didn't realize. But this event was based off of her memoir that just dropped. I think it's called, I'm gonna insert it here. I want to say it's called A Lovely One or something like that. But basically, she discussed her life up into becoming who she is today, the first Black woman to be nominated to the Supreme Court, okay? And there was a few things that she touched on that I thought were particularly interesting and things that I would want to share. So the first major takeaway from her interview was that she had a very intentional upbringing. So her parents put her in a lot of different activities. Her mom put her on like a speech team, and she always got really good grades. And her parents were just very intentional about how they were raising her and what they were exposing her to. And she talked a little bit about how when she was younger, she lived on campus for a little bit with her dad while he was in law school. So her dad ended up becoming a lawyer and basically like broadening her horizons. Also, she mentioned how her parents made her a well-rounded human. They taught her to have self-confidence so that she wouldn't look to the world for validation. And that spoke volumes. Like, that was a bar. And I feel like when she said that, I had a lot of thoughts. And I had this conversation with one of my friends recently. I had a lot of thoughts about that because I feel like some people definitely seek validation from society. But recently, this has been happening for a long time now. Social media validation is king these days. Like, it's like a form of social currency almost. And when she said that, it stuck out to me because she was really just on a different wavelength than some people. And as young women, I think it's like super important to have that self-confidence, especially a young Black woman who doesn't necessarily fit into society standards of what they accept from Black women. Self-confidence is key. And I have conversations with my friends on a regular basis about just needing to take a step back from social media and things like that, because we do find ourselves comparing. And my friend actually was discussing how social media can make you very covetous as a person. And when you think of coveting, you think of like, in the Bible, they talk about coveting someone's wife or, coveting things that somebody might have. I know on social media that's very easy, but with this new like uptick in lifestyle content, I feel like people are becoming covetous of other people's lifestyles and other people's lives totally in general. So why that stuck out to me was that instead of paying attention to what everybody else around her was doing, she was focusing on herself and enriching herself, and that's how she became who she is today. The Ketanji Brown Jackson, period. It also got me thinking about how if that was the norm to be taught self-confidence and to not seek validation outside of yourself, how that would affect people today, society, social media today. Like, what would influencing even look like? What would most of the things we do on social media even look like? Just, food for thought. The next thing I want to talk about is her support system and also her partnership with her husband. Her husband was a seventh generation Harvard student, and his family came over on the Mayflower. That stuck out to me as well because I did not know this information. When she was talking about how they first got together, she was saying that she was afraid of rejection, so she didn't put herself out there. And she also came to the conclusion that nobody liked her as a result of that. Lo and behold, somebody did like her. Somebody was looking at her. Somebody was checking her out. I think that was interesting about her and her love story is that it's more than just skin deep. They really were able to develop a friendship first. They did face some, challenges as a interracial couple. I don't know what year this was. They've been married for 28 years, so it was some time ago. Another thing that stuck out to me was the support that her husband has for her. So her husband was working he was a medical student for a very long time, she said. And then he was doing his residency, I think she said, in Boston. And they were hoping that he would stay there. But he pretty much told them, my wife, we need to live our lives in DC because she's going to be on the Supreme Court one day. And that's what he did. He left and moved to DC with his family. She had to figure out work-life balance and what that looked like for her and her family because they had unique circumstances. So with his career and her career, they're both very demanding. So he's a surgeon. So at times she had to man the fort. At times he had to man the fort. She talked a lot about teamwork and how that's what got them through. She was talking about the struggles of being a mom who sometimes had to put her career first and how she couldn't have done that without the support of her family. So her husband knew how much her career meant to her. She knew how much his career meant to him. So when one of them needed to put their career first, the other one supported them in that. And she was talking about how you don't need to be ashamed of being the mom that shows up to the bake sale with the store-bought goods and stuff like that. And she discussed how her children were on board with this, and her children were very aware of her career, very aware of how hard she was working, and were also very proud of her. So much so that her youngest daughter, when Obama was in office, she wrote to Obama saying that he should appoint her to the Supreme Court. It's like manifestation. 2 elections later, you get appointed. It's like it was meant to be, honestly. Yeah, those were the takeaways that I got from her interview. She's really funny. Apparently she did an comedy improv class when she was in Harvard. She did a little bit of theater, and she did it with Matt Damon. I didn't know Matt Damon went to Harvard. That was interesting to find out. All in all, her life, everything is just very inspiring. I really like the way that she spoke about her family. You can tell that she comes from a very strong support system. And she talks about her friends that she had at Harvard. I think they were all her roommates at one time, and she refers to them as her sisters. And they're still really close to this day. I would say it was a blessing to be there because she really motivated me, and she really put a lot of things into perspective for me because especially the intentional upbringing, because as a person who was put in a lot of activities growing up, I didn't always appreciate them because sometimes I wanted to have a normal life. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to just come home and chill and not have to go to practice and not have to do this and do that and just have a weekend where I'm just doing nothing. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes I did, but I don't always appreciate how intentional my mom was with my upbringing, and sometimes I downplay it because it just wasn't always what I wanted to do. But I really liked her perspective and how she explained how it shaped her as a person. And honestly, some of the things that my mom put me in, I definitely would not be who I am today without those things. So we talked about Ketanji. She was amazing, very inspirational. Now we're going to talk about this book that we've been reading in book club, A Walk Through Fire. So we don't actually have our discussion on this book until September 28th. but I read the whole thing. And I will say some of these books in book club are a little hard to read because I don't think I'm into fiction. Like, it depends on the genre, but I really don't think I'm into fiction like that. But the nonfiction, I love it. Nonfiction means not false, right? Like the true stories. Girl, don't get me lying. Anyways, I love it. What I will say about this book and the parallels that I can draw between her and Ketanji. So this is Sheila Johnson. She co-founded BET with her husband, and she also is the founder of and owner of the Salamander Resort in Middleburg, Virginia. And she like owns a lot of other resorts too, not just that one. But as a DMV person, the Salamander is, I want to say, one of the only resorts I actually know of in the DMV, and it is a luxury resort. It's very nice. Like, it's expensive too, real expensive. But the parallels that I could draw between her and Ketanji are being a mother, being a wife, having a successful husband. And I would say the main difference is that Ketanji definitely gets more support from her husband than Sheila did, but they still have been able to go off and both do amazing things. Some takeaways that I can take from both of their stories is the partner that you pick is so important. It's so important. Like, it's so important. Like, you know how girls be like, oh, I can't date a broke man. Like little stuff like that. But in reality, though, like, the trajectory of your life could be very different. And let's not even say a broke man, because a broke man is not, I wouldn't say a broke man is necessarily a problem depending upon his age, because I feel like in the world of finance, you can be rich one day and broke the next. I will say a broke man with no ambition. Please. From what I've pulled from both of these stories, a broke man with no ambition is like a dead-end job. You ain't going nowhere. And you're not going anywhere. And that's the main takeaway that I can pull from this book and Ketanji's story. And when I read Ketanji's book, I'm going to come back with another like review or whatever. But it's the same thing as having a dead-end job. Like, you put in the time every day, you get no reward. Like, you could barely pay your bills, like barely scraping by, like no raises, no promotions, just same thing, complacent. And so Sheila Johnson's husband, Bob Johnson, the one that co-founded BET with her, she has two husbands. She's currently married to a man named, I want to say his name is Bill Simmons. I would have to look it up because I don't really know his last name right now. I know his name is Bill. Let's see. And it was also interesting about this book, she has a random like photo album in there. Very interesting. Yeah, I don't know Bill's last name. Bill Newman, her new husband. She married him, if they're still kicking. She married him in 2005, and she's been married to him for some time now. And Bill is the real deal, okay? He was a judge, so period. Who you pick as a partner is very important as a woman. It can literally make or break you, literally make or break your career, the trajectory of your life, all of these things. That was a major takeaway that I got from these two stories. So for Ketanji, like I said, she had a very supportive partner. Like, he's telling people, nah, I gotta move to DC because my wife is gonna be on the Supreme Court one day. And look at what the support got her. She on that joint. She on the Supreme Court. And Sheila Johnson played more of a, I would say, a passive role in her marriage. Now, Ketanji didn't really go into her marriage and those dynamics too much, so I don't really know what role she plays. But Sheila goes into all of it in this book, and I think it's a great book. Like, it's such a good book. I don't know if it's because I love reading stories about women who live and are from this area, meaning Washington, D.C., DMV. Sheila is from, I want to say she's from Indiana, if I'm not mistaken. She's from Indiana, or up north, and she ended up moving to DC with her husband after he graduated grad school, I want to say. Okay, so let's talk about Sheila's people. So basically, in this story, Sheila talks about how she went to school. She was a classical violinist, and she was so good that she got a full ride to play violin at her school. And then she also like assisted in writing some textbooks that are still being used today to teach violin. Very interesting. She became a wife pretty young, like right out of college. She met Bob Johnson in college, and they got married shortly after. And then from there, she pretty much followed him around. So he moved to Columbia for a little bit for a grad school program. And while she was there, she was pretty sure she was working in music again, like at a local school. Then after that, they moved to DC. She started working at Stillwell Friends, which, if you didn't know, is the school that Obama sent his kids to. Very interesting. And she started a music program there, and from there she started like a youth orchestra in the DC area. Around this time, her husband was working for a broadcasting association, if I'm not mistaken, Public Broadcasting Association or something like that. So he was, he was working on the Hill, doing all the things, working the association life. And he decided that he wanted to branch out on his own, and he actually went out and found a couple of investors. So they started Black Entertainment Television. They understood there was like a niche in the market. People were looking for something to cater to Black people. And at the time when they first got on air, they started with like 2 hours or something like that, and then eventually they worked their way up to 24-hour programming. So basically, when BET first started, she was holding him down. So BET wasn't really making any money, okay? Bob had to pay employees, and then he really wasn't taking any pay while it was still getting off the ground. So she was working at Stillwell Friends and with the orchestra while that was happening to support them. And that's what she did.
So I didn't go into as much detail as I would have liked, but she held Bob down in a lot of ways. Bob made the money a lot of the time, but she handled the finances, and she made sure the money went where it was supposed to go. She also was the breadwinner during the time where BET wasn't turning a profit, and all he could afford to do was pay his employees. Later to find out he was having affairs with one of his employees, and then later on had another affair with another executive employee. And around this time that Sheila found out was when he let her go from BET. So then she had to go around town, and pretty much they were public figures, so just hear about the mistress and all these things, and it was just very embarrassing for her. But all of this made her very strong for her next phase of life, and gave her the strength to leave that man.
So then when BET started to get too demanding, she basically quit music to do BET full time, and she worked with him up until they divorced. And throughout her marriage, throughout the book, she talks about how in her marriage with Bob was not very supportive of her. He was very he was very condescending, it seemed like, and he talked down on her and her plans a lot. But he would always accept her support, though. He could not support her in the way that she was supporting him. But she played her role for a long time. And I want to say it was because he was very successful. Because even though Bob was a-hole,
he was also a cheater.
Which he was. He was very ambitious, very successful. He was very business minded and business savvy. So that worked out for them, okay? So basically, when she split from her husband, I want to say that they both got like $800 million or something from the split. Because by this time, BET had went public and all these things.
Sheila held that man down till she physically couldn't anymore. She admits in the book that she became stronger over time and finally gained the courage and strength to leave him. But by the time she did, BET was $1 billion company.
Throughout her marriage with Bob, she had started buying up land in Middleburg, Virginia. She bought a castle, and that's where she was living full time after the divorce. And then she just started buying up little shops and land in Middleburg, Virginia, and eventually decided, let's capitalize on this. Let's build a resort. So I think it started as an inn, but then she realized she was thinking too small. She was like, I got to think big. And then she came up with the resort. And she had so many ideas that the resort ended up being bigger to accommodate all these things, bigger than she had thought, honestly. So then she ends up marrying Bill Newman. And what I find interesting about Bill was, so Bill is a man, a blast from the past. She had done a theater play with Bill when she had first moved to Washington, D.C., if I'm not mistaken. So Bill had pursued acting, but then he decided, I'm going to go to law school, went to law school, became a judge, girl. Was a lawyer for a while, became a judge. And so he was a judge, and he knew, like, she had confided in him some of the things that she had went through in her marriage. And she so very much wanted to marry Bill. She was so in love with him. But she wasn't ready. She was hurting. She was still going through things. She still had insecurities. There's a fly in here, excuse it. There were all these things going on. So Bill basically told her, you need to get some counseling. You need to get some help. You know what I'm saying? You need to get some help. And she did that. And when he felt like she was ready, he married her. And I just feel like, I don't know, like, both of those stories are so interesting because I feel like social media is so filled with the worst stories about love and romance. And then you pick up a book, you know what I'm saying? And it just, yeah, like her first husband wasn't ish, but honestly, she found the gratitude in him and being with him and being his wife, because she was like, you know, if I hadn't done all these things, if I hadn't gone through all these things, I wouldn't end up with the resources I had today to be able to do what I'm doing today. You know what I'm saying? If she would have left him before he started BET, that would have changed the entire trajectory of her life. You know what I'm saying? So her just holding him down and just being there for that long, that was her reward, you know? That was it. That was it. She put in on BET and she got that payout. And also I think that, you know, the trials and tribulations she faced in her first marriage ended up helping her be strong, because she had this big fight when it came to, she had a big fight with the town of Middleburg when it came to actually starting her resort, the Salamander Resort. So I feel like her trials and tribulations from her marriage definitely prepared her for that. And she was able to come out on top with that as well. But that is it. That's all I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to draw the comparisons between how successful both women were and then how like their partner played a role and everything like that. As a person who does want to get married, I'm getting more comfortable with saying that because I want to get married. Choosing your partner, like it's so important. And I love hearing about like successful women and how they've been able to manage it all, the business, the relationships, everything. And honestly, to a certain extent, they just do it. Like they just do what they need to do. They get up every day and they just do what they need to do. And it does suck and it's not always fun, but somebody's got to do it. And yeah, I think they're both very inspiring women, and I think you should check out both books. And yeah, so I think for the rest of the night, I think I'm about to just cook some dinner. And I have some cleaning to do because I'm moving out of here in a few days. I'll be gone in like 3-4 days. It's Wednesday. I move on Sunday. So we'll be going out of here soon, and I'll be in my new space, and I'm very much looking forward to that. I can't wait to cook in my new kitchen. Ooh, I can't wait to take everything shower in my new shower. Like, I'm just so looking forward to it. The next video you're gonna see is me moving, probably, most likely. But yeah.
So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you. Like I said, the next video I'll be moving, so I'll see y'all next time. Until next time, okay? See you.